So thanks, Andrew. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining from. You're all warmly welcome to this Innovation Edge session. So in this session, we're going to share updates on the prototype for the people, by the people, an alternative solidarity model. So I'll just want to kind of highlight on the colleagues who have been working on this, just to for everybody to know who they are. Venetia, Alvin, Habo, Pascal, Mandla, Andrew, and myself. So we've been doing some work on this prototype for a couple of months. Now, this prototype responds to two key questions. And these questions came out of the inquiry process during the social lab. The first question was, how might we reimagine a new approach and organizational model for international civil society solidarity and action? And the second question was, how might we enable and mainstream a justice and solidarity-based approach that changes the way INGOs think, measure their success, and shift power to local activists and CSOs. So this prototype was designed to actually create disruption and propose an adaptable, both online and offline solidarity platform model, building on our own local systems and processes, or indigenous systems and processes. What this prototype also seeks to do is to create an alternative, inclusive solidarity platform. And we are using or leveraging on the pro-democracy struggle of local activists in Swaziland. And you'll be hearing a lot about that from our colleagues who are working on this on the ground, Thabo, Venetia, and Mandla, who are on this call. And so today, we'll hear a lot from these colleagues or activists who worked within a framework of a multi-stakeholder forum. And the idea of this multi-stakeholder forum is that it's a broad-based, multi-sectoral social justice front that was formed in December 2021, right? So what is this prototype testing, right? It is testing the effectiveness of the platform, which challenges INGOs to listen, learn, and respond in service to strategic issues that are emerging. So for example, from the Swazi struggle, through a reverse call for proposals, a proposed solidarity fund, and a mechanism to promote transnational solidarity. So this is what the conversation is going to be about today, how we can actually do solidarity quite different from how we've been doing it. But before we get into this conversation, what I'd like for us to do is to really get a feeling of the experiences in the room. It's an opportunity for us to share and learn and really appreciate the experiences in the room. So at this tech team to put into the chat the Mentimeter link. So I'll ask all of us to click on that Mentimeter link, and you'll see we'll ask a couple of questions. So I'd like to start from the first question. I hope we've all been able to click on the link. Excellent. So how many of us have experienced real solidarity? So this is a yes or no answer. How many of us on this call have experienced real solidarity? I think colleagues are still joining us, which is great. So for colleagues who are just joining us, we are sharing our experiences. We are sharing about our own experiences around solidarity. There's a Mentimeter link platform. Kindly click on that Mentimeter link so that you could also answer the questions. There are two questions. The first question is, how many of you have experienced real solidarity? I think we are more than 6, so I'm just waiting for colleagues to answer. This is more of a yes or no answer before we move to the next question. Have we been able to locate the link? Maybe if we post the link once again for those who have just entered. Excellent. Okay, great. So we have 16 answers, 16 colleagues say yes, 7 no. So for those of us who've just entered, there's a Mentimeter link. And the first question, we're trying to share our own experiences around solidarity. And the first question is, how many of us have experienced real solidarity? Right. I think we can now move on to the next question. Thanks, Andrew. What did it look like in a sentence? So if you've experienced real solidarity, what did it look like? If you could express that in a sentence. So if you've experienced solidarity, can you share what it looked like? Andrew, you may have to refresh. Well, if it's not coming up in the Mentimeter, we could also share on the chat.
You should have it now as the next slide.
Okay, it's coming up at the next slide. Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. Well, it doesn't seem to be showing here, but I believe we can still share in the chat. That's fine. If we could also share in the chat. So what does it look like? The solidarity that you've experienced, what does it look like? If you could express that. Alex from Talk to Loop said it has felt positive and empowering, gives energy. Thanks for sharing that. So we can share in the slides. It felt held up by others. Thanks, Pascal, for sharing that. So if we've experienced solidarity, how did it feel like? If we could express that in the chat, that would be fine. Venetia said, so, to her, solidarity is about sharing responsibilities and fellowship. I think that's a very, very good way of putting it. It's about listening and understanding people's needs, according to Paz. Sarah says it's about feeling safe to explore risks and share ideas without fear. So a safe space to share. Penny says it feels as warm and life-enhancing as love. I love that. Thank you for sharing, Penny. Josman says it feels like removing obstacles for people to contribute and connect. So it's about connecting, it's about removing obstacles. It's also about contributing. Thanks, Josman, for sharing that. Valeria says, soothing teamwork. I like that. I like the word soothing. Soothing teamwork. So it's blissful. It's a blissful experience. Thanks for sharing that, Valeria. Ignacio says it's feeling part of a bigger movement beyond borders. And that's amazing. Feeling part of a bigger movement that goes beyond borders. Thanks so much for sharing that. And Sarah agrees with that. Feeling of emancipation. And Emmett says solidarity means to boost and help to achieve a great purpose. Excellent, excellent. So this is what the conversation is going to be about today. And today we're going to hear from our colleagues who have been working on this prototype, which has been an extremely intense and fluid process with what is happening in Swaziland. And so I would like to welcome my colleagues Pascal and Venetia to share with us what has come out of this process. Pascal.
Sure, thanks so much, Charles. And I think it was interesting to see, I think when last slide I saw about 16 people had responded positively to having experienced it. 7 didn't, so it's not a universal thing that we have had experienced, but as was just shared, the ones who have experienced it, I think exactly that warmth, that love, that support and emancipation and beyond borders that was underscored, that's exactly what we wanted to try to build up on it within this prototype. And just maybe 2 disclaimers before I start is, as Charles shared, we've been using the word Swaziland, and just to explain that we're not using Eswatini as a by choice, because Eswatini was the choice named choice for the country by King Mswati III, the current king, which took the decision unilaterally. And as well, for those who are less familiar with Swaziland, he's the only absolute monarchy on the African continent. And exactly because he chose it unilaterally and undemocratically, it's not acknowledged by, let's say, the pro-democracy and human rights movements in Swaziland and beyond. So that's why we're using Swaziland, and we'll continue using that. The other one is Tabo has been able to join us. Bongani is with Venetia, but there are many others who are not on the call here that have contributed to it as well in Swaziland, just to acknowledge their contribution in terms of the thinking around that there. And maybe just to be quite upfront from the start, what we'd love from our side to take out of today's discussion is both update on what we've been doing and the situation in Swaziland, but as well, we hope that you'll get inspiration for your own work and see how we can pick some of that up. So it would be great to see how you can, contribute to our thinking and the next steps of what we're wanting to do. But as well, we hope that you'll pick it up in your own work. And Andrew, if you can share the slide, that would be great. I think just to give you a background on why we wanted to start with that, and it was away from that love. I think from my side, I was one of the initiators then with others joining in. It was the frustration of the situation of Afghanistan. I'm just showing three pictures, and Andrew, you can click twice already, is, the mayhem that I think people recognized there. At the same time, the person in the middle is a Afghan colleague from Cordaid who had to flee because of the situation there, and getting her out of Afghanistan was very difficult, because it felt like the whole international community had kind of shut the door after Taliban had come in, while at the same time, and that's the last slide, you know, the struggle of the people in Afghanistan continued. Andrew, if you can click twice, I mean, the kind of headlines that we get was, you know, the EU pulling the funding out. And at the same time, I and Venetia as well and others had experienced other options, like what had happened in terms of the anti-apartheid movement with South Africa, where Venetia had been centrally involved, and I joined in later as well, showed that there are other options out there. When looking at the case of Afghanistan, we've also felt, okay, it's too complicated and too many people involved at this stage. So we're looking at, so how could we build that idea of supporting people and the struggle inside the country and outside the country in another situation, in a way that we knew was possible and were inspired by. And that's where, Andrew, you can click twice still. That's where the situation of Swaziland came up. So when raising basically and discussing the situation in Afghanistan with Venetia, she immediately responded to the kind of situations they're in. And Andrew, you can click one more time. Because of the developments in Swaziland. And Venetia, just over to you.
Thank you very much, Pascal. Yeah, you know, it's in these discussions where old friends who have come a long-standing relationship between South Africa and activists in Holland, of which Pascal was one of. And I think when we started to discuss and look at the options of colleagues in Afghanistan and what could be done, and how very ordinary people could actually participate or have a voice or have an opinion or support in some sort of way. And we began to talk about the anti-apartheid struggle, which, as you all know, I mean, it spurred on one of the largest anti-apartheid movements or social movements across the world. I still do believe that that is one solidarity initiative that was not only instructive in the sense that it actually had a direct impact on what happened in South Africa, but it was also, you know, it went across the world quickly. It went across the world where ordinary people were against the regime in South Africa and would actually support. So it wasn't about getting a donor in Holland. It was about getting solidarity and support, and the support we got was quite phenomenal. It included where professionals had actually joined our organizations or would come to work in South Africa or the region and just offer their skills. Particularly in those days, I mean, you know, whether it was medical or legal or just even policy assistance, but we got it. And we talked about it, and within the context of, we then took it forward and talked about the fact that, you know, with South Africa having had benefited from a really different and alternative form of solidarity that wasn't just donor-based, but it went right down to the ordinary person in a country, any part of the world, all over the world. And Swaziland, who at this juncture really needed that form of solidarity. First and foremost, you know, very few people know about what goes on in the country or what has been happening. There's been a complete clampdown on media, and it's a small country. So, you know, the international media is spoiled for choice in terms of what they could be covering, you know, whether it's the war in the Ukraine or actually some of the political dynamics in South Africa or Zimbabwe, for that matter. So Swaziland is a very small member of Southern Africa, and we thought it would be really interesting to see whether we could bring the two together and understand how we could maybe operate or undertake a form of solidarity in the changed environment and what that would mean. And therefore, you know, we will get back to you on some of the more concrete things we did. But it was looking at, well, this would be an option. You know, some of the sentiments you all expressed is exactly the sentiments I think every South African who is either living overseas or was part of the broader struggle. And maybe just to leave you with a one thought, you know, when it came to actually owning the struggle, South Africans did that. They owned the struggle. Our solidarity partners had undertaken the manner in which they had undertaken their solidarity didn't take that ownership away. It reinforced it. But we also had a lot of common interest. You know, there was an acceptance of kind of political ideologies, of the alternatives we were looking at in South Africa. So on a number of levels, the really good solidarity partnerships were with people that we agreed on a number of levels, and we shared similar ideologies, similar values.
So, yeah, just building on that, and Andrew, you can go to the next slide. We then looked at how to go about it. The idea was just where Venetia left off is really to ensure it is owned in Swaziland. So we're looking at both an inside process first and foremost, and then see how that can be supported by the outside. Venetia, I'll let you talk about the insides.
Thank you, Pascal. I think, you know, when we started to look at this prototype, I mean, I think we were so overly ambitious, you know, to try and prototype something in a struggle. That was our first lesson off the bat, you know. Struggles don't go in any linear fashion, so it's all over the place, and it's a test of how responsive one can be. And you know, the model of having an inside and an outside, we also kind of borrowed it from the anti-apartheid movement, where you had a very strong internal center within South Africa, where the issues and the values and the principles and the alternatives were designed and were owned. And our colleagues and our partners outside in the rest of the world would not only agree with what we're saying, but they would also be able to identify the issues that were being raised in South Africa as being what they also experienced. So issues around equality was not just a South African issue, or was not just a Swazi issue. Equality is a world issue. So it's about also recognizing that it's not sympathy, it's much more empathy of accepting that we support these struggles because we understand we have similar conditions to deal with. So the Inside platform was also something we identified because we found in the very beginnings an engagement with Swazi comrades that there really wasn't a single center holding. So you had disparate civil society, you had a disparate array of political parties, some of them that were banned, others that were operating but very under the radar. And so we decided that this prototype would be actually quite good in terms of focusing on an area we thought could really offer the greatest amount of strategic value, which was the center and bringing people together to actually have their voice, that the issues that would be coming out of Swaziland would be well consulted. I think I'll hand over to you, Pascal, now.
Maybe Andrew, you can click on the next one. felt, as Venetia was indicating, a number of challenges while we were trying to do. One of them was, so how do you prototype in the midst of a crisis? So is prototyping, for example, the right approach? I think that's why sometimes it led to some forms of frustration as well. It's not about prototyping, it's about doing and providing direct support that is needed right now, and not about reflecting on where we're moving and if we're moving into the right directions. The same time, and it comes in with outside as well there, we wanted to ensure there was the groundedness in Swaziland. At the same time, there was need for some form of financial support for this. But how do you get financial support without overtaking the kind of internal discussions that are happening around there yet? So it was kind of a catch-22 situation as well, that looking at the outside will be next, comes up as well. So we were looking at setting up something. I think we later on will present where we got to in a very tricky situation as well. Yeah. And maybe just one more click, just to highlight as well that it is unfolding. So the setup, both of the multi-stakeholder forum, and colleagues will be able to talk to that more a bit later, but as well, our accompanying process is not viable as yet. So there is quite an urgent need for broader support as well, and I think for additional ideas from others on how we could move that forward also.
Maybe I could just come in real quickly, Pascal, to say that, you know, our choice of actually focusing the prototyping or the support or the experiment around the multi-stakeholder forum was us actually supporting what was existing. So we didn't come in with a new program or a new initiative. Ours was to look at how to support what Swazis themselves were saying they needed as a more broader center that brought all the kind of pro-democracy groups together. So in that sense, I can say that one of the key principles in starting out the program was consultation, that everything we undertook was actually what was required from Swazi context, and organizations, they actually took an ownership of it, and this was their program we would come in to kind of support. The other thing we found was that, you know, the capacity and just also having the number of organizations able to take on the kind of challenges that had come up in the country last year, where after years of being, you know, really very quiet as a country, you had an all major uprising and hundreds of people were killed and maimed. In fact, Bongani, who's sitting next to me, is one of the survivors. You know, he lost a leg in that uprising. So the situation had turned, and it was almost as if we couldn't recognize Swaziland anymore, but it had become serious, that there was a need that Southern Africa and those that would have solidarity with these contexts couldn't really sit behind. We really needed to do something. So we undertook a few processes. And those were processes to support the multi-stakeholder forum, to engage entities inside Swaziland, outside of the forum. So to build the consensus, the local consensus between civil society organizations, activists, political parties. And that in the main is where we still are, actually. I mean, we've run one or two very formal processes, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. I think in terms of activity-wise, we haven't yet undertaken the full validation of the consultation and the draft strategic plan that was brought together, the kind of multi-stakeholder, you know, not the individual organizations. So yes, thanks, Pascal.
Sure, and maybe just to initiate, so our focus has been very much around the inside and setting that up, but there has been as well some outside engagements, and Andrew, if you can click another time, where, as Venetia mentioned, we were a bit in the catch-22 because we felt, okay, we needed to really ground it and be able to engage, build on those engagements that Venetia mentioned, and those face-to-face meetings that were taking place in Swaziland to try to get common understanding and directions as well for the kind of outside support. But at the same time, knowing that there was actually direct support needed. So we tried to complement and strengthen what was there, keep the needs at the center, be adaptive and flexible. Next click. So we had series of engagements as well online through the RINGO community and established networks. And there, I mean, because of what we're describing as well, we felt a bit hampered. I think I saw a couple of people who've joined who we engaged with and we weren't really able to follow up with, for example, because we didn't necessarily have a full direction yet. There have been as well some physical meetings as well between Swazi activists as well as regional and continental funders to highlight the Swazi struggle more and see if there could be some seed funding coming in still. Yeah, that speaks to the challenges as well, is so how to keep those local needs really at the center and sustaining engagements and raise interests throughout. We were just wanting to stop a little while because we would love to hear whether at this stage there were any questions already and clarifications before we go on to actually maybe saying more what was really achieved through this process until now. So I don't know if anyone has questions. You can put it in the chat or just raise your hand. If you have questions so far. Jack, please.
Hiya, thank you so much for a fascinating presentation and for all the work so far. Given the restrictive context that you're working in, how did you communicate with, or how does Swazi civil society kind of organize itself? And were there specific things that you did to counteract restrictions on the ability of people to associate and assemble, I suppose?
Thanks. Dabo, did you want to take that one, or Venetia?
Maybe I'll start, and if Thabo wants to look at, the situation is quite hairy, particularly now. I think, so civil society in Swaziland does exist. It's a small civil society. There are a number of organizations that, whether it's more at the level, also human rights-based organizations, it's a small but growing civil society. We traveled in very often to Swaziland, so a lot of our engagements were very face-to-face and not necessarily over the telephone, because that was not easy. So we did have to expand a lot of energy traveling between the countries. And I think we have engaged to such a wide degree that the information we get or the engagement around the program does actually tap into all of the sectors that I would say are supporters of the pro-democracy movement. So it's been identifying old community activists. The one area that we did look out for, and I think we would need to do it going forward, is maintaining a balance between the urban areas and the rural. Swaziland is very much a rural area. But when you travel into Swaziland, it's often a lot more easier to engage in the urban setting where most of your civil society are engaged or are based. So something that we're going to need to work on as well.
Okay.
Did you want to add something?
Yes, thank you, Pascal. I think Good evening, morning, and greetings to all colleagues. I think for us here in Swaziland, I think what has been more critical is that we used also existing organizations that have been in operation for some time to try and create platforms and forums for engagement, because they were there, they are registered, they are recognized by law. So we took advantage of that and used those organizations such as the Foundation for Socio-Economic Justice, INGO, which is the Coordinating Assembly, and many other organizations that were there that are legally, operating. So it's easier to use those organizations to create spaces for engagement, but also in the context of a shrinking civic space, also that becomes a problem, and those organizations have become a target for the state in terms of ensuring that they close the operating space for civil society, for some of these civil society organizations. But I think what we have been able to leverage on is that it's not easy to literally close the space for these organizations because of the milestone they have covered, also because of the international solidarity that we have got from partners here, and the support that we have got from multilateral structures like your UN, special rapporteurs, your regional and international networks that we belong to. So that has really helped in the pushback in opening the closing civic space at a local level, and other organizations that we've worked with at a regional and continental level. So I think that, in addition to what Vanessa has said, that is what has really helped us to engage and create spaces for broader engagement as the civil society in Swaziland and the regional and international solidarity partners. Thank you.
Thanks, Dabo. And Tara, I saw your question. I think I'll take it up after the next couple of slides that we'll share, because I think it speaks to some of those points as well, but we'll pick it up there. Andrew, if you can maybe come up with the next slide. So, I mean, we kind of indicated how we went about things, but so what was actually achieved both inside and outside? And Manisha, I think you spoke a little bit about it already. And Andrew, you can click 3 more times, but I'll let you pick up, Manisha. Manisha?
Thank you, Pascal. I think also I'm going to ask Thabo maybe just to add, just to say that Mandla, unfortunately, can't join. He's, I think, in a load shedding zone, so he will make it. So, I think a couple of things were achieved up to now, and it's not an end in itself. And I think it's more, it contributed to a range of things. So when we embarked on the prototype, our focus was also not only at the outcomes, but we were very concerned about the process leading up to the outcomes. We are all products of our own context and our own history and the histories of the countries we come from. And we understood that, whatever we may say, sometimes we take on the bad behavior of the states we live in, or that is what we're exposed to. So sometimes we replicate that. And so the processes were not incredibly quick. They were actually longer processes to be able to unearth, to be able to get people's views, to understand where they were. So at some points they were quite long and needed a little bit more support. But we found that from the very beginning, it was important for some accompaniment, for those who had some kind of background, for those who had good networks and could really link them to solidarity partnerships. It was really important to be company, activist organizations, and that required a little bit more engagement. So yes, I would not say that the center is totally holding. I think the fact that it is now an issue that is widely debated and widely talked about within civil society, that the need for the center to hold, for me, I think has been a really good influence. Certainly the issue of Swaziland, the developments are transmitted even more outside. There's been raising awareness about the issues and the country in itself to some degree. I think there's more that can be done, but certainly Swaziland is not as unknown as it was before we started the initiative. And I think you certainly can say that the process did assist in putting together a kind of a strategic direction. Organizations and the various sectors now need to go and engage with their own membership and come back and input into the broader strategic direction. So yeah, those were some of the influences that the program did have, or the initiative did have. Maybe Thabo can add just from the way he saw it from within Swaziland.
Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. I think also it will be very important for one to also mention the fact that we, in the process of the developments that were happening here, through the formation of the Multi-Stakeholder Forum, which is an inclusive platform and diverse in nature, we were able to also come up with terms of reference, which were meant to, when the SADC process around the engagements or creation of a platform of a dialogue where government of the country will engage with the civil society and the multi-stakeholder forum through, in a way we'll be able to come together in a dialogue, in a more, mediated dialogue as a people of the country. And we had a proposed terms of reference, which we shared amongst the multi-stakeholder forum and also with the SADC committee, but also we shared with the government of Eswatini. But what became apparent is that that dialogue has not taken place to date. But it was a process that the multi-stakeholder forum engaged in. But also we formed committees that will, coordinate the work of the multi-stakeholder forum as per the strength of each of the members of the multi-stakeholder forum. And we have found, traction, and we are moving. Those committees are coordinating the work, ranging from resource mobilization, international solidarity, local mobilization. And that is what is making the platform to gain traction, but also taking experiences and taking advantage of the members of the platform itself and their own capacities. Yeah, that is what has been achieved thus far.
Thanks, Andrew. If you can click on the next one. So the other thing was the outside. So what was achieved there? To some degree, there has been identification of external spaces to host key functions. So there, I think compared to the inside, the consolidation has been even less. And Tara, to your question, what would we need to see more and be more proactive about is for example, that. So we had different conversations with a number of outsiders, but we haven't been able to follow up. And for example, on a personal level, I felt very inadequate in terms of being able to dedicate enough time and resources on that. So I think that has been a real struggle for more people than myself. I think I was in a better position, maybe even. So we found very interesting initiatives like, well, Loop, Alex is on the call here, I think I saw, which I think would add a lot of benefit to this initiative, which we haven't been really able to follow up on and build up. The two other things more concretely that we were able to achieve more outside, one was something I am actually excited about, and we're looking at really launching after a more thorough review by comrades inside Swaziland as well, is this reverse call for proposal. So building on what was done before and identification of the needs in Swaziland, which some of the three key needs were around sustaining that platform, the MSF, and I saw some connections as well to work that has been done in Iraq that we could look at. Thanks for that. But it has been, well, the consolidation of that, and part of it is simply being able to sustain it, fund it, make it more solid. Another part was really around the mobilization of the different constituencies that Venetia and Thabo as well spoke about. So how can we really get a broader mobilization? And a third one was as well in terms of actually having kind of direct support to particularly the survivors from the struggle from the last couple of years, and as well having economic access, having psychosocial support as well, and more broader social support for those. So there were some of the key needs that were identified, and the reverse call for proposal, what we're doing there, or what we're proposing, is really flipping the reverse, the call for proposals around, and basically calling for funders and other supporters, not necessarily with funding, but with expertise, experiences, commitments that can help us in this situation, but with the vetting and the kind of profiles that we're looking for, then being provided by Swazi colleagues, and for them as well to choose the kind of support they would like. And we hope, of course, including funding partners, but that there would be a review basically of the funding partners in terms of their vision and mission, their ethics, where the money comes from, how they would disperse the money, the kind of risk profile that they would do, partner assessments that they would do. So we have a tentative reverse call for proposals, which we're hoping to launch quite soon. And the other one was something that probably is familiar to you and nothing, let's say, out of the extraordinary, is kind of a solidarity fund, where as well it would be both flexible, responsive, and needs-based, and to have a space to host that. So we're happy through engagements as well that Civic has offered to host that fund, and there are interests in supporting that. This fund needs further consolidation as well in terms of looking again similarly on how to arrange it on the practical side, but as well on the decision-making side, so that the fund is really decided upon by Swazi communities and activists and organizations, and meeting their needs as a whole, and not necessarily on a sectoral basis or individual basis. So those were some of the things we were able to achieve over the past period. Yeah, would be very happy, and Andrew, you can stop showing the slides to hear more from you who are all on the call on your thoughts, your advice on how we could take this further, but as well any thoughts on how you could support this also would be very welcome. And just as a start, I'd love to give the word to Bongani and to Thabo on any other thoughts on that, and then open the floor. So there were some comments and questions in the chat already, so feel free to add them in the chat already. Thanks. Bongani?
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Good evening, good day, good night to everyone. Thanks to share this moment with you. Yes. Maybe Comrade Thabo will help me here. For us on Swaziland, maybe I'll talk more on the issues of victims and survivors. Yes, because our organization is still at the establishment stage. And what we need is to see or to help the victims, especially in the issues of counseling. You know, most of us, we think we do need counseling, but we would ask for a help where we'll be able to have a training of trainers to the victims so that they are able to help themselves on trauma counseling and help their families too. And also, for now, what we are doing at the organization, we are collecting a data of the victims and the survivors. So trying to put a data, because most of us were unable to come out. With the help of the Roman Catholic, we have been able to get a tool or a data collection tool that will help us to have the data, and would love to have that data in a cloud memory where we will not lose it and everyone will be able to have that data. And that data, we try to get a data that will be conductable so that every victim must be conductable and also must be reachable. So after doing the data collection, that is when we'll also come with the need assessment, the proper need assessment. But for victims, for now, what they need programs that will bring back or will restore our dignity. Because for what has happened, for us, we have lost dignity. Most of us now who were able to work after the political unrest, they are unable to work. Other victims or other children of the victims, they cannot go back to school. And also, even those who are living, some of them now, they are still living with their bodies. So we have got those challenges. That is where we can need maybe a form of help to for us, for everyone. Yes, maybe I can end there. I think Comrade Thabo can help us.
Maybe can I just quickly come in, Comrade Thabo, just to say to people that Bongani is in Johannesburg at the moment and will be undergoing some medical tests and also some counseling. And there has been, he's needed to leave the country. So I think, you know, also in terms of support when people need to leave Swaziland, that's also something that, yeah, we might come back to you on. Thanks, Thabo.
Thank you, colleagues. I think Bongani has mentioned some of the things, more especially when it comes to the needs on the ground. I think, as it has been mentioned, the needs for psychosocial support, for livelihood support, for victims and survivors of the massacre who are now incapacitated. Most of them are now incapacitated to make a living as things were before the massacre happened in 2021. But also, I think it's very important for us to mention that we come to this state because in July 2021, in Swaziland, we experienced something that we have never, we have never seen before, where we saw the killing of more than 50 people in 2 days by state-sponsored violence, through state-sponsored violence by the army and the police combined, and as a response to an unarmed number of people. Basically, the whole country was up in flames because of protests that were happening by citizens of the country. And the response from the state was purely through the barrel of a gun, where people were injured, people were killed, and which we still see happening. People are still being hunted down by the police. People are still, there are still late night raids and early morning raids in communities by the army, and there are roadblocks everywhere in the country, managed by the soldiers, which is a situation of fear and despair that we see in the nation. And we are encouraged by the resilience that we see from civil society organizations from across all the board, in terms of organizations that are continuing to call for the end in the violence that we see on a day, to call for the restore of the rule of law and democracy in the country. And in that quest, we still need support on issues of ensuring that we continue as a people to resist the closing civic space that we see in the country, but also we continue to have activities and profile what is really the need of the people of Eswatini, and have a dialogue amongst ourselves as a people in terms of the way forward, and shared experiences of different communities within Swaziland, but also shared experiences with other social movements within the region and the continent, but also to learn from other experiences as a people of Swaziland, to say how best can we take forward the challenges that we are facing, but also the support in terms of financial needs of building the capacity of the organizations within Swaziland, so that they can be able to cope in operating under the repressive environment that we operate in. I think that will be very important for us as a people. Thank you, colleague.
Thanks, Thabo. If people want to ask questions, just raise your hands, but there are a couple in the chat already, and maybe I'll just read them out. I think one question that Tara was asking, I'll take the two together, that you ask is, what would we want to have been more, or should we have been more proactive about, and what would we like to see emerge? And at the same time, where would you like to see measure progress in terms of impact and as well? So any thoughts on that? I don't know, Venetia, if you want to go first, and Thabo maybe after, I can add some thoughts also.
On what we should be looking at. Yeah, I think, and maybe Thabo will give a little bit more detail in it. The current situation in Swaziland has descended. We said it was quite difficult and repressed earlier on when we started the program. The situation as the Swazis find themselves now is even more concerning. There's been constant levels of violence perpetrated against activists. So you've had, political party leaders whose homes are petrol bombed, whose vehicles have been petrol bombed. It's ongoing. So as of last year, June 29th, the uprising may have dissipated in some ways. It may have morphed in others, but it's ongoing. And every day there's also been the kind of formation of something called the Solidarity Forces, who act in so-called defense of people that have been bullied or repressed or the like. And these nameless, faceless people have also, in the last, I think 2 weeks it was, or 3 weeks, we've had a number of police officers that were targeted and shot. So the situation in the country is becoming very fraught. I will not be surprised that a number of people, organizations will be, you know, arrested, or they will attempt to close down organizations because they know, I mean, there are just so many organizations that are very active. So I think the security profiles of all of our partners, the security needs of all of our partners are important. And it's not just the money. And I think we would need to maybe look at the possibility of setting up a kind of communications network that once something happens to, you know, members of the various organizations we work and support, that it can be taken out very broadly and very widely. So I think the communications issue is very big because there is no real majorly big media in Swaziland. And often when we start raising these issues in other countries, it does present itself as a little bit of a safety mechanism in some ways. Then I think, you know, if you look at how change actually comes about in Southern Africa, and if you look at, just took South Africa as an example, you know, our governments only really respond when they have the marching masses at their door. If they don't have that, they're unlikely to be responsive. So I think it is in the Swazi's interest to look at how to consolidate and build on that mobilization. The more mobilized the society is, I can say from a SADC and maybe a South African perspective, the more likely they would actually get involved and raise an issue. But as long as there isn't this really obvious mobilization, like, you know, any of the spring uprisings, they're unlikely to act. It has to be very physically in front of them before they're able to do or say something. And you can see that. The 29th of June, as soon as you had the kind of uprising and the burning of properties and the like, that's when SADC entered. It was almost immediate. So more mobilizing, building the capacity of the various sectors. In a sector like victims and survivors is an important sector. They hold the moral value of the struggle. You know, that's why the world's attention was drawn to Swaziland. And I think if we are able to put together an alternative that provides the means of being self-reliant, that would be the most ideal. And as Dax was saying, you know, there simply are no jobs in Swaziland. As you can look, you know, and there's hardly going to be any more jobs created, but it's not just a Swazi issue, African issue as well. So it's no longer about finding a job, you know, one needs to maybe be a little bit more creative of what that self-reliance could be in our various contexts.
Thanks, Thabo. Did you want to pick up? And as well, Tara is asking what kind of role for outsiders could there be, if you can maybe pick that up as well.
Okay. Thank you, Pascal. I think for me, as Vanessa has said, I think the increasing security concerns is also an issue that I think the international solidarity and international partners that we work with come in with in terms of increasing our capacities in terms of security, digital security, and physical security for activists here in Eswatini, but also enhancing our, in building very strong protection programs for the human rights defenders here at a local level. But also, I think what is very important is also increasing the support in terms of building the solidarity movement across the world, which will help, putting the regime under pressure actually participating in an inclusive mediated dialogue that will aim to solve the impasse that we are in the country. But also, I think in addition to that, supporting the sustainability of the internal actions within Swaziland, will be very critical and important, so that there is sustained internal activity in Swaziland that will put the regime under pressure. That will also attract the attention of the international community and multilateral structures like SADC, as it has been happening. And one should just say that also with the activities that have been happening in the past few weeks, SADC is also coming in through the Troika organ. They are coming in the next week to also engage with the government again to see what sort of solutions can be engaged on to find a long-lasting solution to the impasse that the country is currently in. So yeah, I think for me, in addition, that would be what I can say.
Thanks. Maybe just to add on to that one, and I'll take your question, Tyler, as well. One of the ideas, and I don't know if anyone on the call here, one of the ideas we had been discussing is the kind of research that would be needed on Swaziland, particularly on the resources as well, the economic resources of for example, the king, and have a more thorough research on what that would look like to identify then, link to your question, Tara, what would be the leverage, what could be entry points, to identify as well potential entry points to increase pressure on there, either on governments in terms of where some of the resources from Swaziland go to, but as well then on the Swazi government and the king in particular. So that would be one area to go as well, where we're thinking of, well, could we build up as well more evidence and research around that? And I think that would be one of the ways to go. That links up to your question, Tyler, about the reverse call for proposal. Yes, it is still on the table. I think if you heard what Tabo and Venetia shared, it falls, let's say, broadly still on three categories around both financial resources, around as well real organizational strengthening of organizations, including, well, security aspects, but as well manpower of, for example, the Multi-Stakeholder Forum as well, and the more immediate direct support that is required for people like Bongani and the survivors there as well. So we're looking at still moving ahead with that. The idea, and I think on the one hand, one of the questions we've been having is how many we should have and who the target is. So one could be directly really focused on donors and in terms of and funding partners, with one struggle. And to me, Tara, your question, what would I like to see more? I'd love to see more donor interests on Swaziland, because we got some feedback around, okay, no, great idea, but wrong country. Because basically it's not on the map of donors. So I'd love to see interest both on the idea of how to really respond and have a needs-driven approach, and on the other hand, I mean, a really attention on Swazi situation also. So one would be really focused on the donors. The other one is more linked to what Venetia mentioned before. I think we all saw, and I think where we should put more emphasis moving forward as well is, all of you in this call, other people around, there's great resources in terms of people and expertise that we'd love to tap on. So in terms of as well approaches for broader psychosocial support, because one-on-one counseling won't be happening. There are experiences from across the globe in trying to adapt that as well, and that we could translate to the situation in Swaziland, for example, and other areas of expertise, for example, on research that we're mentioning. So I think we might end up with two sets of calls for proposals, one really geared to more the funding partners and donors, and one which is more the kind of people power and people's expertise. I'm just looking, I think there was Were there any other, I think the other things that I saw were more comments on what has been said, but if there's anyone who has more questions, but as well suggestions, and you know, we're here as well, we're sharing with you what we've gone through, and it is really still very adaptive and fluid. And if you have any suggestions on how we could move on from here based on your experiences on your networks, or things which should, people we should contact, things we should do, please do share. And just on the reverse call, I think I can share as well drafts with people who are interested. Just send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat as well. But as well, we hope to send something out quite soon. So Tara, you're asking, what do you want to test? Because that's what the prototyping is about. I have my thoughts on that, but I'll ask, I think, Venetia maybe first, because I think it's been one of the and maybe Charles as kind of an inside outsider, if you have your thoughts on what has it that what according to you have we been testing, but it's been one, maybe a little bit of a bone of contention around our understanding of prototyping as well. But Venetia, did you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, I think we had difficulty with just the whole notion of prototyping. I think what we're hoping to test, Tara, is whether in fact we could move away where support is not just about donor and donor assistance, but also become, you know, it includes whether it's around research, whether it's communications, whether it's actually assisting the Swazis get to the point of strategic clarity. And whether they can be, you know, whether the solidarity, whether we could recreate the kind of solidarity we had during the anti-apartheid period. I think that, look, that time is gone. I think so much more would need to be done in order to actually replicate that. But we certainly did use some of the old mechanisms. And my feeling is on the outside platform now going forward, that's where more can be tested, I think. For me, I think it might be very worth our while to be able to bring on board some of those entities, some of those individuals who were very instrumental in setting up the kind of solidarity that we have still not as yet been able to replicate. You know, for an example, the concept of a solidarity fund. For some of you, just to let you know, I mean, the International Defense and Aid Fund that was set up to support the anti-apartheid movement was probably one of the biggest, if one had to compare to kind of contemporary, campaigns or the like, and how that was set up and why it took the kind of form. There are some of those characters and individuals who are still alive and still around. So I wonder if, you know, as a continuation of this platform, for those who are interested in maybe a discussion, to give your names to Pascal, and then we could see whether some of these old anti-apartheid activists who actually set up these institutions could join us on a call and maybe test it out a lot more, because we are in the testing stage. It would be good to include some of you in those discussions.
And just before I'll move on to you, Charles, as well. I think and Tara, I'm looking forward to continuing discussion with you. I think what Josman is mentioned in the comment is what I would see as well. We've been trying to test, and it links to what Venetia said, is how can we come up with a mechanism that really puts needs at the center. So I think some of it has been described, but how can we then structure that through kind of reverse calls of proposals through the kind of funding mechanism, but through the way we engage as well. And that's where, so we try to test both processes of engagement physically and otherwise, and as well the kind of support mechanisms that are being put into place. And to me, it really moves from one to the other. And that fluidity has been one of the challenges I find, but I think to me, that's really at the center of what we have been trying to set up. And then a reverse fork proposal is just a expression of that, for example, or the funds that we're trying to set up is an expression for that. Charles, I mean,
yeah,
as set out at the start, we were looking at both, creating interest and engagements around Swaziland. The other thing that we're looking at is as well, so how could we, use some of what was being learned in other situations, in other processes in terms of solidarity and getting that feeling of warmth and love that people have expressed and emancipation. So I was wondering from your side as well, if you had anything being involved as well, maybe a bit more from a distance in this, what you made out of the whole process, where you see energies and interesting things, and how you might translate that into your own work as well.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Pascal. I think Venetia, Thabo, Bongani, and you have spoken a lot about the most important aspects of this prototype, is really to get to the core of what the needs are for the activists. And one of the things that when we are asked what we're trying to test, and from the work that we've been doing, it's really looking at how can we create, like you said, a mechanism where they can get support from the outside, but in a way that will be useful and relevant for their struggle. And that's why I think the reverse call for proposals is quite innovative. Of course, we are testing that to see what the response will be to that. We are looking at targeting different audiences, not only funders, but other audiences to request for support in the way that will be useful to the movement, in a way that could help advance the objectives of what is happening on the ground. And so for me, that is important, just like with the Solidarity Fund. And why is this important? Because we're trying to come up with a model that will make solidarity or transnational solidarity something that becomes a familiar way of engagement. So currently, what is happening in Swaziland does not necessarily concern somebody in Angola. We want to change that. We want to make sure that in the future, if something is happening in Botswana, even though we are in West Africa and Ghana, we can rise up in solidarity to support what is happening in Botswana, because there's a certain connectedness between all of us. We want to make sure that transnational solidarity becomes the way in which we connect as a continent. And for us to do that, we need to understand what the needs are in a specific place, and see how we can support, and the kind of support that is really needed. I like the fact that the point you made about the fact that some countries, not only Swaziland, but countries like Swaziland, they don't have enough donor attention. And I feel that this is also a process that will bring a spotlight to Swaziland, and kind of put pressure on our governments nationally, the regional bodies that we have, to do something about what is happening in Swaziland. So it's a way of citizens organizing beyond borders. So that is the kind of mechanism we are looking at testing with the Swazi situation, which is quite ambitious, but I think it's a step in the right direction, Pascal. Thanks for help allowing me to share this.
Thanks. I'm looking at time as well. I don't know if you wanted to close off, Charles, as well, with the last two kind of questions, because I think we've talked enough. We had wanted to have breakout rooms, but we're advised to change that. So sorry for
Yeah.
being a bit unilateral from our end. But yeah, over to you, Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Pascal. I'm not sure the Mentimeter would work. So maybe we just use the chat. And I think we'll be comfortable with the old school. So just two questions. The first question is, what will you do? So those of us on this call, what would you do to support solidarity in Swaziland? If you could share this. So if you're on this call, what can you do to support the solidarity with Swaziland? What would you do to support this process? So colleagues, what would we do to support our colleagues in Swaziland, our comrades in Swaziland? So we can share this in the chat. So any form of support. I know Pascal has shared his email and he's leading on the reverse call for proposals. I'm hoping we'll get support in that, and then thinking through with the Solidarity Fund, which is being offered to be hosted by Civicus. So there's going to be conversations on that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lisa. Share information, stories with my network from on-the-ground organizations. Excellent. Thank you, Lisa, for doing that. Dax, the only way I know to support is with direct giving to those I care about in the country. Excellent. Institutional capacity building, nice. To help explore and test what and how a new solidarity can be put together. Thanks, Tara. Leand contributes to amplifying information about the situation across various online platforms. Thanks, Leand. Josman, share good practices, keep in touch, and establish a more permanent network despite the difference in context. In that sense, I'm available and at the order. Thank you. Thank you so much for being available. Ignacio, give visibility to the prototype in INGO and funder circles. That will be extremely important. Extremely, extremely important. So, and then there's a second question, which is more of personal to all of us in terms of how we are moving forward. How will you integrate solidarity in your work? How will you integrate solidarity in your work? So based on the experiences that we've heard from our colleagues in Swaziland and our own experiences and some of the mechanisms in which we are testing, based on all of these things that you've heard, how will you integrate solidarity in your work? Jack says, discuss how we can support further development of the prototype in the country, given the excellent start that's made. Thank you so much, Jack. That would be really helpful. Thank you, Jack. So how will you integrate solidarity? Oh, that's for the first question. Thank you, Jack. How will you integrate solidarity in your work? So we can share in the chat. Any thoughts on that, on how we're going to integrate solidarity in our work? Tara says she's written a piece on a new solidarity and want to see how it can be the basis for deepening practice. Thank you so much, Tara. I hope you could share that piece. Is it online? Is this something that we can collectively access? And then Dak says, make sure you look out for which voices are missing in any conversation. Excellent. Tara says it will be online. So we're definitely looking forward to that piece. Thank you so much, Tara. Josman, place it on the public agenda in advocacy networks, not just as a cross-cutting issue. Thank you. I think that's important. women's voices, queer voices, disabled voices, religious minorities, basically giving voice to everyone in terms of in diversity, everyone, all minority groups. Thank you so much, Dad. Pascal, give time and resources to initiatives and people you care about. Keep away from transactional partnerships, and within his network, initiate discussions and seek to mainstream solidarity in their work. Thanks, Pascal, for sharing that. These are very, very great contributions. So great. This was a really, really amazing conversation. So I would like to thank everyone who participated, especially our colleagues based out of South Africa and Swaziland, our colleague Pascal, Sotabo, Venetia, Mandla, Bongani, and all the other comrades, Andrew for providing support, and all of us who are on this call. Was a very, very, I believe, productive call. And just before we go away, just a quick input from Lisa: provide online platforms for people from organizations to share concerns, and that's what she's going to do. And Jack, continue to support and signpost people towards the VUCA coalition, which is specifically built around solidarity for civic space. I think the VUCA is something that Civic has either initiated or leads or works around, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you so much, Jack, for that. The VUCA coalition, and Jack has shared the link in the chat room. Right. So just a quick announcement. So what's coming up, and Andrea has put it in the chat, coming up next, Rebecca from Rios is inviting all of us to share a meal together while we reflect on the highlights of the day. So that's the next session. That'll be in 15 minutes time. And then later we have 3 open space sessions hosted by allies in our wider community. So Luke Hoffman is running a session looking at transformation in the conservation and environmental space. MSF are exploring ways to dismantle racism in our organizations, and Andrew will be part of that conversation, Andrew from Rios. And then Waxi will also host a session for our Francophone community to discuss decolonizing aid in sub-Saharan Africa. So we definitely hope to see all of you there. So thank you so much for your participation in this session, your contributions. And I think it was a really wonderful learning experience. Pascal, do you have anything you would like to say before we exit?
No, I think, thank you so much. Looking forward, I've put the email in here. I'm on the WUHA, I think probably as one of the only ones from Venetia and others on the app as well. You can contact me there so we can keep on engaging. And maybe my last call, as Venetia was saying, I think just as well on behalf of Bongani and others, the survivors to us are the most immediate real struggle now. So if there's any way we can find support for them, let us know. Would be very, very grateful. But thank you so much. Wishing you a very good end of the day as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Pascal.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you. Bye.